Welcome to the Leader's Edge podcast. I'm Sandy Lake Cox, Editor-in-Chief of Leader's Edge. In this episode of our new Government Affairs podcast, Council Vice President of Government Affairs Blaire Bartlett interviews Congresswoman Erin Houchin of Indiana. We're then joined by Government Affairs SVP Joel Copperrood for an update on the Council's advocacy work, including movement on PBM transparency, cannabis, and the presidential election. Give it a listen. Blaire, Joel, it's great to talk with you again. I'm excited to hear who you have on tap for this member of Congress interview. We've got Blaire sitting down with Representative Erin Houchin from Indiana. Blaire, why don't you give us a little intro?
Yeah. So Congresswoman Erin Houchin represents the 9th District of Indiana. It's about, I think it's like maybe a 2-hour drive from where I grew up. So kind of similar, from similar backgrounds, similar Midwest families. And I wanted our members to hear from Congresswoman Houchin because not only is she on our two main committees of jurisdiction, House Financial Services and House and Workforce. She has an interesting background. You'll notice kind of a few themes throughout that, I think should be highlighted for our members, and that's a drive to service and her hustle, which is not unlike an insurance broker. And she does point out, and I didn't script it this way at all, the amount of bipartisanship that exists in Congress, and that isn't covered. And so I'm really excited for, to kind of have our listeners hear this interview.
All right, well, let's give it a listen.
So I'm here with Congresswoman Erin Houchin, who represents the 9th District of Indiana. You are a freshman member of Congress. Let's explore your background a little bit. Explain, I guess, kind of what is the 9th District of Indiana? What is the geography of that?
Sure. The 9th District of Indiana is like the southeast corner of the state. So the far left part of my district is Monroe County, which includes Bloomington and Indiana University. If you draw a line from IU over to Ohio and from IU down to Kentucky, I have everything in between. So it's about 18 counties. It's a very rural area. My biggest city is a second-class city. That's Jeffersonville. It's right across the river from Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay, great. And are you from that district?
Yes, I've always lived in the 9th District, went to IU, grew up in Scott County in Scottsburg. My dad was a dentist. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for most of that time, and my dad told me I could be anything I wanted to be when I grew up, just not a dentist. So I went into politics. But he loved his patients. He just didn't like the practice of dentistry. So I think that gave me a perspective of serving the community, which is part of my drive for service today.
Okay. And let's talk about that drive to service, if we can. This isn't your first foray into politics. You have been in public service. Your husband's been in public service. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, what you kind of did before you got to Congress?
Sure. I'll try to make this as quick as possible. It's a long and sordid story, but I started as an intern in the Indiana State Senate in 1999 as a senior at IU. That's where I met my husband. He was a House intern. He was the only House intern I met. We became friends, and after the internship, I loved being part of that policy-making process so much. I called the State House staff, House and Senate, every Friday for 6 weeks in a row until they gave me a job. I got a job as a legislative assistant, and about midway through the year, I got a job offer to make more money serving as a statewide elected official in a bigger role. That was the worst year of my life work-wise, and it almost ruined me on politics completely. So after I graduated from IU, I worked, my degree was psychology. I worked in child services and for various nonprofits dealing with children in foster care and in the child services system. My husband and I got married. He was a law student. I was very active politically, volunteering for Young Republicans on a variety of campaigns. and going through every type of leadership program you could imagine. Women's Campaign School at Yale University, campaigns and elections training in DC, the Indiana Leadership Forum, the Lugar Series, you name it. If it was a candidate type training, I was going to it with the intention that I thought maybe one day I would help someone else. I ran my husband's campaign. He was our prosecutor elected in our county for 16 years. He's now a Superior Court judge. Our kids have always been involved politically. I have a 19-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 14-year-old, 2 girls and a boy. And when we first started, when I ran my husband's first campaign, our daughters were 2 years old and an infant. I would literally load them up in the car and take them knocking on doors for him. And then I ran for district chairman of the Republican Party in Indiana for the 9th Congressional District where I serve today. I was 9 months pregnant with my son. I ran for that because I think we build our communities from school boards to Washington, D.C. and not the other way around. So I ran for district chair and won that race Saturday, gave birth Monday to my son. And then that put me back on the trajectory that I am currently on, which led to me getting my master's in political management from GWU, to working for U.S. Senator Dan Coates, which led me to run for the legislature, which led me here.
Okay, that's a lot that's involved, while also raising 3 kids.
Yeah, I remember when I was studying, in the master's program, I'd put the kids to bed like at 9 o'clock and study till 3 in the morning and get up and be a stay-at-home mom. And I really thought I would be behind the scenes. I went to GSPM and they would say 90% of people in this program will get a job offer before they graduate. And I was in the middle of Southern Indiana thinking I'm the 10%. And literally midway through that program, I got a call from our U.S. Senator Dan Coates looking for a regional director for the Southeast. And my husband said, listen to what they have to say. Don't take the job. Just hear them out. I was a stay at home with the kids still. They offered me the job, and I took it and called him on the way home and told him.
Good. And it sounds, like it is, you have that public service mentality. You have kind of that go-getter, hustle, mind frame, and that hasn't stopped.
That's true. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I ran for the state senate in the first place. My senator was a 26-year incumbent on the other side of the aisle. He was a Democrat. The district was, barely Republican. It was like 50.5% Republican, but he just was not active on behalf of the district, and that to me was disappointing. So yeah, it's a go-getter attitude, and I don't really take no for an answer. I usually tell my staff, don't tell me no, tell me how or why. Yeah. And that's the stance I took as a legislator, and still today, I'll go to the end of the runway and try to go a little bit farther if it's an issue that I'm deeply passionate about and feel that it's that important to keep fighting for.
Yeah. And you're still busy. You were not on 1 committee, not on 2. You're on 3. And there's even a little bit more. You're also president of your freshman class?
I'm the elected leader for my class. So we've got a president, a policy chair, a steering committee rep, and then an elected leader. And I was elected leader for my class. So I represent the freshman class every fly-in week at the leadership table on behalf of the group that sent me there to represent them.
Great. And then what 3 committees are you on?
I am on House Financial Services, Education and Workforce, and the Rules Committee.
Yeah. So I would say I know what committees you're on, but explain the scheduling commitment on rules. I mean, I think, folks tend to understand, committees, it's committee hearings, maybe a couple times a week, maybe some subcommittee hearings, but the rules committee requires, it's more of a time commitment.
Yeah, so the Rules Committee meets every fly-in day. The weeks that we have a fly-in, the Rules Committee will meet the first day. It's either usually a Monday or a Tuesday. We start at 4 o'clock and can go until 9 at night or 3 in the morning. It's whenever the work gets done. So if we have a really contentious bill, like on the debt limit, I think there was an energy bill and a border bill that both took, HR 1 and HR 2, both took significant amounts of time. It reminds me, honestly, of when I served in the legislature, because you can sit in, the Senate chamber for hours upon hours until the wee hours of the night when you're, trying to get legislation done at the end of a legislative session, and sometimes we're in the Rules Committee for literal hours. There are no time limits. There are no guardrails really for how much time that's going to take. It takes whatever time it takes, and you're there for it.
Yeah. Is it wrong that my first thought is like, I hope they give you snacks?
They feed us very well. They do feed us, yes.
Not that you have to sit there for hours, but I hope you get drinks and snacks.
Yes, they do feed us very well.
Good.
Which is good because we're there for a long time.
Yeah.
We have to be sustained.
And I know we're excited at CIAB to have you on 2 committees of jurisdiction for our issues. House Financial Services for the things like flood insurance, terrorism risk insurance, and Education Workforce Committee, things like if there are amendments to ERISA, employee benefits issues. So it's great for us. So thank
nice
you.
To have a friend there.
Yeah,
I appreciate that very much. And I think too, particularly with the labor issues and healthcare issues, in particular, I was also a small business owner. In between the time that I ran for Congress the first time and got elected to Congress the second time. So some of those challenges I carry a unique perspective on that I think has been extremely helpful in that committee work too.
Yeah, we say it all the time that, it's less than 8% of the members of Congress have experience in the insurance industry. And that's, I know those numbers are a little bit higher for small business owners, but you don't realize the lack of functional experience that members of Congress.
It makes your job harder.
A little, yeah. We like to call it education, advocacy. But yeah, it is a lot of educating. And what are going to be your priorities this Congress?
Well, in the Financial Services Committee, I'm working on a few things. One is just increasing access to capital, particularly for smaller retail investors, but also small and medium-sized business owners to seek investments up to $150 million to grow their businesses without having to go through an IPO and all the red tape that comes with that. That's Regulation A+. They really probably should call it Regulation A++, because Regulation A+ raised the threshold and we're raising it again. But that's, those kinds of things are important to me in terms of financial services. I care deeply about trying to fix this flood insurance issue. I say if flood insurance isn't working in Indiana and it's not working in Louisiana, probably there's something we need to do to address it. So that and the housing issue, just trying to increase access to affordable housing and for single family homes. Those first time home buyers who are really having a hard time finding a home or building a home that is in a price that they can afford. And so those are issues within that committee that I'm working on, and then also figuring out this cryptocurrency and digital asset space and trying to make sure that we get a good regulatory structure so that we are not under threat, or the US dollar isn't under threat from other countries. In terms of the healthcare work on the HELP subcommittee, I did a couple of bills in Indiana dealing with insurance. One of them was increasing access to Medicare supplement plans for adults over 60 or under 65 who have a qualifying disability. We were the 31st state in Indiana to do that, and I did have to work very strongly hand in hand with all the different stakeholders trying to come up with an end result that wouldn't cost any particular group more than another in terms of subsidizing that program. So I was proud to get that done. In addition to that, the cost of healthcare is way too much. We currently also have federal agencies that are really over-regulating. They're putting in requirements. For instance, in my district, I visited some of the healthcare facilities that they're requiring, a certain number of staff to patient ratios that are not possible in our current economy. So those issues, and then reducing the cost of healthcare and onshoring as much of our drug supply chain as we can, so that I've got a manufacturer in my district that is a drug manufacturer, and they are fully reliant on a lab in Wuhan, China for some of their component parts that they can make in the United States if we give them the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Last two questions. We always kind of end the podcast with these two. who's the member from the other side of the aisle that you work best with, or that you've recently worked with? We like to show that members of Congress do work bipartisanly. It does happen.
I will say I talk often when I go home that this place is more cooperative and collaborative than I expected it to be, and it's more functional than I thought, coming in. And we've passed more than 40 bills with 86% bipartisan support, and that doesn't often get noticed. I'm working on a couple of bills with Julia Brownlee. That's a dyslexia piece of legislation, and then with Judy Chu on a foster care bill dealing with some workforce issues related to that, and just making sure when kids age out of foster care, they have the ability to have their diploma, that they have that support. I can't imagine my 19-year-old daughter not having me or support system as she's trying to navigate her next steps, and our foster kids are aging out at 18 without any support in some cases. So certainly looking forward to working with Representative Chu on that. The last thing I would mention is we took a bipartisan trip with the speaker overseas. We went to Jordan, Israel, Italy, and Egypt. And it was bipartisan, so Steny Hoyer was on the trip, Jared Moskowitz, Greg Landsman, and Representative Gottheimer. And that was a great opportunity to spend some time with our Democrat counterparts on the other side of the aisle, and also Jimmy Panetta.
Yeah.
So it was just a really great group of Republicans and Democrats. We had a good experience working together on issues like support for Israel, and that has been a meaningful experience for me.
Yeah. And finally, what's the number one issue that you're hearing from constituents in the district? Things you get stopped for at the gas station or the grocery store? What do you hear about?
The economy and inflation certainly is still on the minds of my constituents, and then the border, just a wide open border and the consequences that come with that. We just heard in committee this week, in Rules Committee, the Halt Fentanyl Act. We've lost 220 Hoosiers in my district to fentanyl overdoses. That's 220 sons, daughters, mothers, fathers, friends, family, and that's too many. And that's the direct result of having an open border and all the fentanyl that's coming across with it. So our law enforcement officers are dealing with it. We're 1,200 miles from the border in Indiana, but we are a border state. Those are things that are keeping our constituents up at night. And then thirdly, the district is very, very conservative. It's a very red district, and so some of these policy positions that my constituents perceive as woke or radical or far left, those are things that concern them too. And for me, that translates to overregulation by the government in many ways, but also, more locally to that is the federal government deciding things like the Biden Department of Education making decisions that really place young females, at risk in many circumstances. And so those kinds of issues are what my constituents are concerned about.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time. I'm sure you have 5 subcommittee hearings to go to.
I am on 6 subcommittees. But yes, thank you, Blaire. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for sitting down.
All right, well, that was great. I loved hearing from her. What really stood out to me before we go to you guys is how just independent-minded she was as a stay-at-home mom. She kind of took the reins of things that were important to her and just ran with it and came home and said, hey, I'm going back to work. Let's figure this out. So, just from a working mom perspective, it was really cool to hear her. But I'd love to hear from you guys, Blaire, Joel, immediate thoughts on the interview.
Yeah, I really liked it. She didn't talk about this, but I really like that she's a member of the Republican Main Street Coalition or Partnership. It's a group of moderate, pragmatic Republicans that are working to get things done. They don't get sucked into the culture war issues. They are not looking to be divisive. They're working to find solutions to the day-to-day problems, and she belongs to that group. And like Blaire said earlier in the podcast, she sits on our committees of jurisdiction, and she is working across the aisle to find the right solutions. She mentioned Congresswoman Julia Brownlee from California. I love Julia Brownlee. Julia is not she's not aggressive on a lot of our issues, but she's one of those pragmatic members that wants to get things done and that avoids the culture war issues and likes to lock arms. And I just really appreciate that everyone that we've had so far talks about bipartisanship and just moving the country forward, focusing on inflation, focusing on healthcare costs, the kitchen table issues that really impact people's lives. So yeah, I thought she was great.
Yeah, and when Joel wanted to do this podcast, in theory, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be great. And I was like, oh, what about all the work? But it's, we are bringing, we're kind of shedding light on those members of Congress who are in Congress because they want to get things done. They are there to legislate, not to tweet, not to, fight on ideological lines. And I hope that, we're conveying that, and these interviews are conveying that we're showing, our members, our member firms, that members of Congress who want to get things done do exist.
Yeah, and it's funny, like we are in the thick of the debt ceiling stuff right now, which is really highlighting the toxicity of Washington. But all the issues that we're focused on are that, like, it's broad bipartisan support. It's not just a little bit. PBM reform. Can we just go into PBM reform real quick? That's our number one legislative issue right now. From the direction of CB, the direction of our advocacy committee is bringing transparency to the PBM marketplace the same way that is forced on brokers. And we believe that current law actually requires PBMs to be transparent with their revenue streams. They've been able to avoid those requirements. And so we just want Congress to clarify that they are actually required to be transparent. And we believe that if they had abided by these rules, it would bring competition to the marketplace that doesn't exist now. Right now, there's 3 major PBMs that control 85% of the market. But it would also add real teeth to the reforms that also has broad bipartisan support, which is rebating reform, spread pricing reform. A lot of our members will say that without the transparency requirements that we're proposing, those reforms aren't going to be effective because a lot of these PBMs, which are very complex entities, are just going to hide the costs. They're going to transition some of these fees to affiliates or move things around. And it's really going to weaken the reforms that they're trying to implement in these other areas. And what I'm talking about, the transparency requirements, that's got broad bipartisan support. So we had movement in the Senate Health Committee last week on an amendment offered by Senator Roger Marshall.
The thing with PBM reform that we're finding is it goes over several committees of jurisdiction, and it depends on how you want to attack it. Are you coming it from a Medicare, Medicaid perspective? That's one committee. If you're coming it from an ERISA perspective, that's a different committee. And so each, House Ways and Means, House Energy and Commerce, House Education and Workforce, and even House Oversight Committee have all had hearings on PBM transparency. And so, we're thinking that the momentum is there for something to be done in the House and Senate. But not quite sure what it will be. In talking with Senate committee staffers, they were saying that, something has to be done.
Yeah, Senator Schumer has given clear directives to his committee chairs saying, I want a vote on PBM reform in the Senate. He initially said in May, he's now saying in June, but we know that the pressure is in the Senate to get something done. The vote in the Health Committee was broadly bipartisan. There were only three senators voting against it. So we can see the traction. As Blaire said, there's so many committees of jurisdiction. This train has left the station and it's moving through all of those committees, and we've got lots of opportunities to influence it. The next one that we're focusing on is the House Education and Workforce Committee. We have several meetings with them this week. So we are pushing to make sure the language in there is exactly how we want it. That's an uphill battle, but I think that whatever gets done is going to be in the right direction. It's going to be a positive movement for our industry. So,
and it's funny that this is just the nature of politics. Senate Health Committee is chaired by Senator Bernie Sanders, and the ranking member is Senator Bill Cassidy. And Senator Bernie Sanders has long fought for universal health care, which we have fought back against, but politics is politics, and now he is for transparency, or compensation, and so it's interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. He made it very clear when he took the helm of the chairmanship. He understands that the political alignment is not there for Medicare for all. And he said, I'm not going to, he's going to continue the fight for Medicare for all, but he knows he wants to get things done. And his focus was to lower healthcare costs and to do so by bringing on reforms to the PBM industry. And that directly aligns with our initiatives. So politics makes strange bedfellows.
Yes. That Midwest background, you want to make things affordable for the people that are living their lives and raising families, putting children through school, putting, significant others through school, or, just trying to buy groceries, and healthcare costs are a part of that. And it's growing and growing every year. And so that's, I know that is going to be a focus for her, whatever she can do to make life a little bit easier for everyday Americans is a goal.
Yeah. All right, switching gears a little bit, on our PC agenda, we have been tracking cannabis for a long time. Joel, I've heard there's a little bit of movement there. Can you update us?
Yeah, our focus has forever just been on the Safe Banking Act, which is it does nothing to further the legalization of cannabis. What it does is it just makes those states that have legalized it, it makes them a bit able to access the financial services industry, which right now they cannot because it is barred. It's still illegal at the federal level. Of course, we want to make sure that our members can offer their services to those entities, which they would be able to under the Safe Banking Act. Unfortunately, the last Congress didn't get it done. The House passed it 6 times. It never made it to the Senate floor last year. So we are at new Congress now. And strangely, the dynamics have flipped. Now the movement is in the Senate. And the question is what's going to happen in the House. But Blaire has been pretty close to the activities in the Senate this year. So Blaire, what's the latest?
Yeah, so Senate held a hearing, and it has been reintroduced. And I think it's, Senator Schumer wants to be helpful. They know that they do need to move something. And I don't think the House will move until the Senate does. I think there's been so many false starts with the House that they're going to make sure that the Senate is ready to move before they are. It's, relatively the same language that's been passed. There are some, we've made sure that insurance agents and brokers are mentioned. And so there's just, some few little tweaks on languages, but, it's, I don't know. I go back and forth on seeing if it will happen, if it will not. And I think the Senate schedule is, partly to blame. They have to go through a lot of nominations. And so that puts a damper on getting things done. And cannabis has been, hasn't been able to move a lot of times because of the Senate schedule and how they move.
It's really interesting. The biggest impediment in the Senate historically has been they've got the 60 votes that you need to get to the Senate floor. The challenge has been it's been a circular firing squad on the left. It's been the progressives holding up the moderates, and it's been, Cory Booker has taken the reins of making sure that the social justice issues around cannabis are addressed before the banking issues. He will make it very clear that the first bill that the Congress passes on cannabis is not going to be a banking bill. It is going to be a get out of jail if you're incarcerated in a state that has legalized it. It is going to make sure that your record is expunged if you have a criminal record in a state that's cannabis related in a state that has legalized it. And he will tell you an interesting story that when he first ran for mayor of Newark, one of the #1 issues was that it's a jobs issue because people in Newark, New Jersey, a lot of them, his constituents, struggled finding a job because they had a criminal record because of marijuana use. So for him, it's personal. But it sounds like an agreement has been struck between him and the chairman of the banking committee, Sherrod Brown, and the safe banking advocates, where they will add some language that will appease the social justice movement and add that to the safe banking bill and hopefully reach 60 in the Senate. As Blaire said, the schedule is a big question mark, so hopefully they can navigate that successfully. And then will that be able to pass the Republican-controlled House? Chairman McHenry seems like he's open to it. And we know that it will pass with broad bipartisan support. It will probably get just as much support as it did in the last Congress. But will it get enough support to make it onto the House agenda? That's the big question. Yeah. So wait and see mode, but I'm cautiously optimistic, but I have been cautiously optimistic for many years now.
Yeah, that's true.
Much like flood insurance reform. Yeah, cautiously optimistic.
Oh, any movement there, Blaire?
No,
no, not now.
No, and I think that leads us right into, we saw two recent announcements on presidential candidates, one of them being Tim Scott, who's ranking member on the Senate Banking Committee. And then you have Chairman Sherrod Brown of the Senate Banking Committee, and he's up for re-election this cycle. And so I think, while the Senate Banking Committee did have a hearing on cannabis, that those two things might slow down activity in the Senate Banking Committee. But I know that we are excited to see, I am excited to see Tim Scott announcing his intention to run for president because of his insurance background. It's great for us.
Yeah, the industry should be thrilled. I mean, he's not a moderate, he is conservative.
Yeah.
But he was a State Farm or Allstate agent. He was Allstate.
I think it was Allstate. Yeah.
He's from our industry. He knows our industry inside and out. I don't know when we last had a presidential candidate who comes directly from our field. So if you're a diehard conservative and love the business and want someone that's in office that knows the intricacies of our industry, Tim Scott is your man. It's a crowded field, and right now, with DeSantis versus Trump, that's going to dominate, I think, a lot of the airwaves. Trump's base is really high. He's got like 40% of the party who's a diehard Trump. Can DeSantis crack that? And they are saying like Tim Scott's route is to go around Trump, not through him, whereas DeSantis is directly trying to challenge that 40% base. And then, of course, you've got Nikki Haley in there, who's interestingly also from, South Carolina. And South Carolina also is the reason that Joe Biden is president. So South Carolina has real players in all this. All of a sudden, they're going to be one of the first, if not the first, voting state in the Democratic primary this year. But it's going to be a crowded field and fascinating to see how this all plays out. But I mean, the presidential season is now, we are in it, and it is going to dominate the congressional agenda. I think moving forward, once we get past this debt ceiling issue, we will focus on federal funding of the government. But a lot of the stuff that Congress gets done is going to be intended to fuel the national campaign, and how this all plays out, remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Well, this is always so interesting, you guys. Thank you so much for filling us in, and we'll hear from the next one soon.
Right. Thanks, Sandy.
Thanks.
That was Congresswoman Erin Houchin and the Council's Government Affairs team. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can find more politics and risk at leadersedge.com.